Gentlemen, you are tuned to 104.3 WQIV, New York, which will resume broadcasting the wonderful WNCN sound at exactly 8 p.m. Please stay tuned. This is 104.3. Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned to 104.3 WQIV, New York, which will resume broadcasting the wonderful WNCN sound at exactly 8 p.m. Please stay tuned. This is 104.3. You are tuned to 104.3 WQIV, New York, which will resume broadcasting the wonderful WNCN sound at exactly 8 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned to 104.3 WQIV, New York, which will resume broadcasting the wonderful WNCN sound at exactly 8 p.m. Please stay tuned. This is 104.3. This is WQIV, New York, 104.3.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is William F. Buckley, Jr., Chairman of the Board of Directors of Star Broadcasting Group. Almost a year ago, I asked you to pledge support for a reconstituted WNCN devoted to classical music. At that time, a committee was formed of New Yorkers devoted to classical music. Its members are Skylar Chapin, Palmer Dixon, Carlos Mosley, David Oppenheim, Theodore Sorensen, Frank Stanton, and Rosalind Turek. Its chairman is Richard Clerman. In February, I wrote to those of you who had responded so generously to the call for pledges to assure you that the WNCN Advisory Committee was hard at work in search of a solution and hoped to have good news soon. The committee met with many disappointments. It persevered, however, and the WNCN sound will be carried by Star Broadcasting Group until the transfer of the license to the GAF Corporation upon approval by the FCC. The means of financing the interim operation have not been totally explored. I should like to record the gratitude I feel as a New Yorker to the WNCN Advisory Committee, and in particular to Mr. Richard Clerman. In the 9 months since the committee was constituted, I have myself met with Mr. Clerman not less than 50 times, and he has met with others involved in the controversy as many times over a period that amounts cumulatively to many weeks of solid work. The narrative of the effort to restore good music to New York is of more than merely parochial interest, and in due course I shall write it. There will be villains and half heroes in it, but only one unqualified hero, without whose tenacity, patience, and ingenuity we would not today be enjoying the resurrection of WNCN. The last classical music heard on this airwave was the Requiem of Mozart, the last 2 bars of which were thoughtlessly chopped off by a disc jockey trained to give absolute priority to the clock. Well, it required more than 3 days, but I think it appropriate to resume the good music with the Resurrexit from the B minor Mass of Johann Sebastian Bach.
We have just heard a portion of Bach's B minor Mass, from the Resurrexit to the conclusion, performed by soloists, chorus, and orchestra of Lausanne, conducted by Michel Corboz, a fitting opening for the resurrection of our format. GAF brings you the first 24 hours of classical music, being broadcast by this station, with a very limited number of commercials. It is GAF's way of expressing to you, the listener, its confidence in a high-quality classical music station. GAF is also pleased to announce that it will file an application with the Federal Communications Commission to purchase WNCN from the Star Broadcasting Group. If the FCC approves this application, WNCN will be operated as a 24-hour-a-day station, providing a balanced schedule of classical music, plus appropriate news, public affairs, and fine arts programming. GAF is convinced that dynamic, intelligent programming is possible. And GAF has the technical knowledge to assure the transmission of a sound that you can clearly identify as outstanding. Who is GAF? A company with a reputation for making quality photographic, chemical, and building products, and a company with a respect and appreciation for good music. Next on our first hour of programming, an overture by Gioacchino Rossini, and we hear The Barber of Seville. The Berlin Philharmonic, conducted by Herbert von Karajan. We have just heard the Berlin Philharmonic, conducted by Herbert von Karajan, in a performance of Gioacchino Rossini's overture to his opera, The Barber of Seville. When did you first learn to love good music? GAF believes it is never too soon to find out about and experience the good things in life, to discover, to explore. That's one of the reasons our line of GAF Viewmaster products have been so popular with both children and their parents. You see, whether it's our regular GAF Viewmaster with its 3D color reels, or our talking Viewmaster that is both picture and sound, they're more than just fun to play with. They're also easy to learn with. It is our desire, if the Federal Communications Commission approves GAF's application to purchase this station, to bring to you, and we hope to your children, a world of the finest quality music, non-stop, 24 hours a day, of quality programming, with a balanced schedule of classical music, plus appropriate news and public affairs and fine arts programming. We know there is a large, loyal audience out there who greatly appreciate the quality sound of WNCN, and we hope they encourage their children to discover it as well. Now we hear a chanson and a verlet by the 13th century French composer Guillaume le Machaut. We hear the New York Pro Musica, conducted by John White in this recording. The music of Guillaume de Machaut. We heard a chanson, Quand je suis mise, and a verlet, Douce Dame Jolie. We heard the New York Pro Musica, conducted by John White in this performance. You are listening to WQIV, New York, 104.3. Here now, news headlines and weather. The Labor Department reports that inflation was running at an annual rate of 14.4% last month, with the Consumer Price Index going up by 1 2/10%. A new inflationary spiral may be starting. The Agriculture Department predicts that food prices this year will be about 9% higher than in 1974. However, the USDA insists that grain sales to the Soviet Union will not have any great effect on retail food prices. And the Commerce Department reported today that in the second quarter, the real gross national product rose by 1.6%, and that is taken as a sign that the recession is ending. The forecast for New York City and vicinity. Passing thunderstorms, warm and humid tonight, overnight low in the 70s. Tomorrow, continued hot and humid with partly sunny skies and a chance of afternoon or evening thundershowers and a high around 90 degrees. The current temperature reading in Midtown Manhattan is 74 degrees, relative humidity 82%. The barometric pressure 30 inches at sea level steady, and the THI 72. GAF Corporation is bringing you the first 24 hours of classical music on this station, and it is GAF's way of expressing its pleasure in the return of a high-quality music format. And now it is time to hear familiar voices over these airwaves, and the first voice we will hear is Bob Adams.
Thank you very much, Oscar Buhler. It's a very great pleasure to be here on this resurrection evening with old friends and speaking to many very old friends and loyal friends. On this first hour, following the opening segment of our resurrection, we shall hear the music of Dmitri Shostakovich, who died before we could go on the air. We'll be speaking with David Dubal, the music director. David?
Very glad to be here. Shostakovich was born the 25th of September, 1906, at Leningrad, and he died August 9th at the age of 68. Since Stravinsky's death, Shostakovich became, without a doubt, the world's most famous living master of music. Serge Kouzavitsky once wrote, "It is my deepest feeling that there has never been a composer since Beethoven with such tremendous appeal to the masses." We open this in memoriam program to Shostakovich with a piano piece, a prelude in E-flat minor, which was orchestrated by Tchaikovsky. I think the work is grandiloquent, but grief-stricken. That was Leopold Tchaikovsky conducting the Symphony of the Air in the E-flat minor prelude of Shostakovich in the very grief-stricken key of E-flat minor. What was Shostakovich in your musical life, Bob?
I think probably when I was in college, he was certainly the first Russian composer of our time that made me sit up and listen and then go on and find out who this man was. And he has stayed a living influence, and he is still of great interest to me personally. I had the very great pleasure of seeing him once. A few years ago in Russia, a concert was announced without a program. There was no hint as to who might be playing. Having nothing else to do in Moscow that evening, my friend and I went to the concert hall and were rewarded with the Leningrad Philharmonic, Gennady Rozhdestvensky on the podium, Rostropovich as the soloist in Shostakovich Cello Concerto, and to our great delight and surprise, a few rows ahead of us, the maestro composer himself stood and took a bow with that eternally boyish face of his.
Which he always retained.
Yes, to the very end.
It's not quite well known that Shostakovich was an extraordinary pianist. In fact, in 1927, he was honorable mention in an international piano competition. He composed for the piano marvelously well, and we're going to hear tonight his Piano Concerto No. 1. But right now we're going to hear the first of his published compositions, Three Fantastic Dances, Opus 1, with Shostakovich himself at the piano. 3 fantastic dances by Dmitri Shostakovich, the composer's first published work, and how fortunate his piano playing is on recordings. Oscar?
GAF brings you the first 24 hours of classical music being broadcast by this station with a very limited number of commercials. It is GAF's way of expressing to you, the listener, its confidence in high-quality classical music. GAF is also pleased to announce it will file an application with the Federal Communications Commission to purchase WNCN from the Star Broadcasting Group. If the FCC approves this application, WNCN will be operated as a 24-hour-a-day station, providing a balanced schedule of classical music, plus appropriate news, public affairs, and fine arts programming. GAF is convinced that dynamic, intelligent programming is possible. And GAF has the technical knowledge to assure the transmission of a sound that you can clearly identify as outstanding. Who is GAF? A company with a reputation for making quality photographic, chemical, and building products. And a company with a respect and appreciation for good music.
Certainly one of the interesting things about Dmitri Shostakovich was his great diversity. In addition to the great works, he had a lighter side, he loved satire, and he had a great sense of fun. We're going to hear a sample of the light music of Shostakovich. We'll hear his galop from Moscow Cheremушки, this performance by the Castellanets Orchestra. That was the Castellanets Orchestra playing the galop from Shostakovich's Moscow Cheremушки.
Bob, didn't you tell me a story recently about someone who was in Tanglewood and heard of the death there of Shostakovich, and it seemed affecting?
Yes, it happened tonight. One of our old friends, former member of the WNCN staff, who was at Tanglewood the night of the death of Shostakovich. The Boston Symphony was under the direction of Rostropovich, and at the conclusion of the Shostakovich Symphony No. 5, Rostropovich came to the podium and made the announcement of the news of the death of the maestro, and asked the orchestra and all members of the audience to rise for a minute of silence, which they did, and then, before he resumed, Rostropovich picked up the manuscript of the symphony he had just played and kissed it.
Touching.
They were very close, anyway, and of course it's a tribute to one of the great composers, but I think also they were close friends.
Well, Shostakovich was deeply involved in the musical life of his country, and he would very well know Rostropovich, and certainly his cello concerto would have been played by him. The piano concerto, though, a work of 1933, dashing and sparkling and full of wry humor, has become a repertory piece, and that's actually rare for a 20th century piano concerto. And we're going to hear Shostakovich himself 43 years after its premiere in 1933, performing the Concerto No. 1 for piano, trumpet, and strings.